Hi, I'm BryCox with BryCoxWORKSHOPS.com, and this is part 2 of the answer that I was asked earlier. I broke because the answer is so long, I broke it up in 2 videos. So the first part of the question, if you remember from last week, or if you haven't watched it, just check out last week's video or podcast. The photographer was asking me about a problem, and it's kind of a lengthy question, but the problem is his prints, when he sends them to labs, don't quite match his screen. And he was asking why and if labs matter. So last week we talked about why labs matter. And this week, right, we're going to talk about your home ecosystem of color calibration. So ideally, you should be able to send a file to any type of printer in various color spaces where your file might be needed. So for instance, I just randomly picked some stuff up here. Like here is a magazine that I was in China, right? And it's a little bent because it was in a box, but I've got a box of magazines for articles I've done, right? And the print looks beautiful. I've also got a photograph here from my studio that I just picked up as a sample print. It's a really pretty wedding image here. I've also got a really pretty album. Right, and now the reason I'm showing these different samples is each one of these is in a different color space. Right, gorgeous book, and it's designed with just big, awesome images all the way through, right? Just one of my nice, cool sample books. Now, compare that to, say, Christmas cards. Right, completely different color space. Compare that to some business cards I just finished for a client with her name on the back. Okay, so what do all these have in common? They're all in different color spaces, but I created all the images for all of these various products. And the idea is no matter what, and no matter what vendor I send it to and who it is, whether it's a magazine in China or my book printer, right, or like a photographic print or anything like that, no matter what, everything should come back looking perfect, right on the money. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, I'm actually going to do, because of the length of this and how much is involved in the answer, I'm actually going to do a little small course on just calibration. But the first thing is we got to start in the camera, right? And keep in mind, every color has a number, right? We've got about 16 million colors we deal with as photographers, and we don't have to know the numbers, but every shade of like our skin, every single dot is represented as a number in a file, and that number gets printed. So I prefer to use sRGB as the color space, right? We could also use Adobe RGB, but here's the one problem. There's only like 5% of labs in the country that support Adobe RGB. So in my camera, I set my color space as sRGB. Now I'm going to shoot in RAW. RAW means it's not going to get a color space assigned. RAW, and it's not even a file format. RAW just means everything the camera captured, this much information, even though we need this much information to print. Here's all the information, just save that to a file, we'll deal with it later. That's what RAW means. So then we go into Lightroom, and if you've watched my Lightroom workflow, we talk about camera calibration, we talk about exports, we talk about color spaces, and building custom exports for different color spaces and for different needs, right? But for the most part, for just prints like this, right, I'm going to be in sRGB. So those exports are going to be in sRGB, and that's when that would get applied. But even if I wanted to make a JPEG right out of my camera, the reason why I set that to sRGB is sometimes I'm demoing, or I'm like I was on Sandy Putch's TV show, and we're tethered and we've got my camera plugged in, so people at home can see on the screen what I'm shooting as I'm shooting, but they're looking at JPEGs, and so those JPEGs are getting an assigned profile. So for the most part, sRGB all the way through. So then my files, as I'm retouching like this, are going to be in sRGB. Now, when I print one of these 2 products, like these cards or this book, these are in Adobe RGB. That is the requirement from this manufacturer. Now I could probably set them sRGB, embed the profile, they'll print just fine. Knowing they're in Adobe RGB, I then change at that point for this particular product, send them those files, right? when I'm sending something for a magazine, I will ask them very specifically, what file format do you need? A lot of times nowadays they're fine with sRGB because they're going to convert it at the end when they are converting the entire magazine for print. Right? So but in the end that has to be CMYK. CMYK is like, what is it, 10,000 colors? I have to add that up again, figure that out. But it's not that many colors. It's quite a bit different from 16 million colors. Maybe it's 20,000. But anyway, it's a huge difference from 16 million. So we don't want to design, we don't want to retouch, we don't want to work in CMYK. What we do is we work in sRGB, and at the very last moment when we need to then, right, we'll save an sRGB version, but at the very last minute we'll convert that to CMYK and send them that one version for that magazine article or that publication or whatever that is. Little business cards, most of the time, depending on your printer, CMYK, that's what they require. If they allow you to send an RGB file, I'd probably send them an sRGB file, but then just know they will convert it. So whether you convert it or they convert it, there's kind of a little bit of trick in how to convert things to CMYK. You can do it wrong. I think people are getting a little better with that, and I think software is a little smarter with it too. But if you're unsure, just send them that and make a little note, and then just let them handle it, the printer, as they handle it. So one color space, keep the same color space all the way through. It's like keeping the same brand of crayons all the way through. You don't want to keep changing brands because it goes, oh, you got an azure blue sky, that's this crayon, but now we're switching to this brand, and then we're going to switch to another brand, and switch to another brand. If you keep switching all the way through, you're going to get some craziness. The next thing is, of course, we're going to calibrate our software, at least in terms of our settings, making sure we're using all the right settings, things like that. But very specifically too, I like to calibrate the lighting when I'm shooting. We talk about that in my lighting course, so that the colors that I'm capturing are true and real and I'm not messing with them later. And man, absolutely specifically, we are then calibrating our screen with a spectrometer. And I talked about that in an earlier Q&A that I can link below, and I can't remember the exact number of which episode it was. But that's when we put, like, my preferred device nowadays is the Color Monkey, and I'll demo this too in my calibration course. But you put that on the screen, it has some software, it flashes up colors. And then if you're doing any kind of printing at home, if you got a great big huge printer, which I don't really recommend because it's a lot more time intensive and harder than most people think, you need to calibrate every single ink and paper or chemistry combination that you are doing. So, and again, you would use the Color Monkey for that. And if you're using a projector, again, calibrate that. So everything has to be calibrated. You got to be thinking of how the devices are affecting your colors all the way through, from your camera to your computer to your software to your screen, and making sure all of that is zeroed out. Because if things are too yellow, we just want to see it's too yellow so we can fix it. We don't want to think it looks great, send it off, get a print back that's too yellow. This is actually one of the reasons why I think some photographers are sloppy by just selling files. So they're basically saying, we don't want to deal with prints because we know our stuff won't print well, and I don't want to print stuff because I know it won't print well. So let's take it a step further. Let's not just be image creators. Let's be artisans, craftsmen, and let's present something great to our clients. I'm a big believer in just finished products that look amazing. Okay, you guys, if you have a question, send it to me. My website, BryCox, BryCoxWORKSHOPS, BryCoxWORKSHOPS.com. And until next time, America,